few things are as unbearable as a thought. That somewhere out there, there are potential, incalculated predators, of these have caused parents so much heartache. It's the little known fact, that one of the things that predators was hiding something, and every one of us, didn't even know that one day, their loved ones would vanish into thin air. And then our eyes question is, who took their life? And this is a tale of Megan's disappearance. And this meant, however, that the fate of the children, who living without parental supervision, was to face up to an unpredictable risk, of under family neglected circumstances. In which, was similar to the circumstances, surrounding Megan Ginevicz's disappearance. There are handfuls of unbelievable details. In this case, in the early 1980s, a single mother, took her daughter, and young son, to Montana, after her broken marriage. Anyone familiar with the wilds of Montana, will tell you that it can be a dangerous place to be. The house located in a narrow, thickly forested valley, outside St. Ignatius, a small remote town, in northwestern of Montana. Following the breakup of her marriage, she started a new life, with her two children, 2-year-old Megan, and 5-year-old Joseph. Despite, she was in a very difficult situation, but she see it, as what seemed to be willing, to have a woman's mothering instinct, for her own children. As best she can, that change is something which will come, and should come. Let's begin by taking the story back to Donia Smith's daughter, was Megan Ginevicz, was born on January 1st, 1978. She was described by her loved ones, as a blue-eyed, and very loved girl, with a cherubic face. Since Megan's parents had divorced earlier, hadn't lived with her father, William Ginevicz, when she was 2. But he still stayed in constant contact with Donia Smith, and especially his daughter. Her mother worked as a nanny, for a family in exchange for room, and board for herself, and her kid at the time before her daughter, went missing. Her father is then said to have relocated, to Colorado, after his divorce. It's the 30th of April, 1980, on a euphoric day, in a remote town of Montana. Like any other typical days, Megan's mother would leave Megan, playing alone, in the unfenced yard with her brother. With a creek, on one side, and a patch of woods, on the other, not far away from where she was playing. Without adult supervision, while her mother was inside doing chores, and would regularly check the children on while working. Afterwards, her brother came inside, saying his mother that his little sister was crying and needed her mom. In toddlers' perception, as they see any strangers approaching in the distance, the initial reaction was to get into a state of between fear and panic, to protect themselves. If she fell into this case, at which may have been sighting of a badly intentioned stranger outside the yard. It was later reported that Megan's home sits in a rugged, remote part of Montana. There is only one track that leads directly to the house, with no fence. At some point in the day, Megan's brother came inside to retrieve their mother, that Megan needed her, and was upset. But he had probably forgotten, that left Megan alone, outside the yard. However, when the mother came outside, to check on Megan, she had apparently vanished in the middle of thin air. The action, they left no trace of having been there, was to show that a kidnapper, how they had a plan carefully, in case there isn't even any noise coming from Megan in broad daylight. By 6 p.m., at the same day, an extensive search immediately launched through the Neby area, where she was living. With little to go on, the whole search and rescue team had arrived, and started combing through surrounding suburbs for the toddler. Almost hundreds of volunteers involved in the search for Megan, whose family lives in an isolated area, and surrounded by undulating pastures, and dense bushland. And plus rain, and later heavy snow began falling, within 10 hours of the disappearance, at which had been hampering rescue efforts, and there is now little chance of finding a survivor. It didn't let up for 10 days. And as the days passed, Megan was nowhere to be found, or as not any evidence found as to what happened to the 2-year-old. They fear the worst has happened. People are starting to lose hope. Little did they know that she'd dead, or alive. In a sense, this seemed like they're planning to put Megan's family member out, and that they're interfering in her mother's ability to work, or righteous upbringing. The disappearance of Megan quickly spread to her father, William Ginevicz, who lived in Colorado, but came back to Montana to help looking for her, and immediately clashed with Lake County Sheriff Glenn Frame, and believed that Megan may have been kidnapped by a family who wanted to raise a child. Ginevicz said the sheriff was too quick to dismiss abduction, and wouldn't publicize Megan's photo, an allegation Frame denied. Ginevicz eventually lost all faith in local authorities. He rode the area on horseback, and examined animal scat for some trace of Megan's clothing. Finally, he too called it quits. It was apparent though, that the day that she went missing, is that numerous suspicious theories haven't come forward yet with the media, at the time of her disappearance. There are two main theory paths for investigators to follow the track of the tale. Speaking of the initial reports, is at St. Ignatius, Montana region, which is no less than a heaven for hunters, but it is also home to various game species, such as ducks, geese, elk, pronghorn, bear, mountain goat, and many more. And the now question is, a 2-year-old child, playing alone in the unfenced yard, but there is only one road leading directly to her house, back in 1980. There are a few flaws in the abduction route, and if so, it's possible that she may have been adopted by hunters, who intended to harm her in some other way. But neighbors did not see any strangers, or suspicious vehicles in the area. It was clear that no one knows what happened to Megan Ginevicz at the time of the disappearance. The circumstances behind her disappearance are unknown to this day, so is any knowledge or clue of where she might have vanished into thin air. The nature theory was relatively much more simple than the initial theory, so investigators pointed out that Megan had wandered off somewhere, to be unknown, that the worst would have happened to her, and she was capable of drowning in the nearby stream, was attacked by some animals, or succumbed to the elements. The poor weather, and thick wilderness, could have made the child's remains harder to find. Megan's mother disagrees with this theory, stating that her daughter was never known to wander off, and doesn't believe she would go near the creek. Either her disappearance wasn't covered in the media at the time, or the media coverage vanished over the years. With no evidence in sight, and there's since been no credible sighting of her. But what is the likelihood that the 3-year-old wandered off? Some weren't even afforded the closure of being told what happened to their children, leaving them to agonize for years and decades to come, with no body, no answers, and no clue as to whether their children are alive or dead. It was later revealed that a woman from Las Vegas submitted a DNA sample to the Lake County Sheriff's Office, thinking she might be Megan, some beliefs based on her story and family, and also her appearance, but to no avail. Due to the lack of evidence, in Megan's case, it is classified as non-family abduction. Sadly, Megan's father, William Ginevicz, passed away after a long search, and not knowing what happened to his daughter. On the other hand, as per his Facebook, he said in 2010, living in car, homeless, with end-stage bone disease, pulmonary fibrosis. A very sad ending for their whole family. Megan's mother, Donya Smith, is still alive, and currently living in Colorado. Over the years, they always continue to fight for information about Megan's disappearance. Their greatest fear wasn't that Megan was dead, it was that she was being kept somewhere, and being made to do things she didn't want to. This is sadly the case for hundreds of people that go missing every year,